welcome to the Album Man, and today I'm going to be ending my unintended hiatus for the Beatles discography by taking a look at the first true Beatles classic in my opinion, which is the Rubber Soul album. In my opinion, this marks the beginning of the Beatles' creative peak, and it's also really the start of them taking complete creative control of their albums, which of course culminates in them focusing purely on studio recordings and not even touring at all by the time Sgt. Pepper comes around. And this album was released on December the 3rd, 1965, to a lot of critical acclaim, of course, and spent 8 weeks at #1 in the UK charts. So let's take a look why. So it opens with Drive My Car. And this is a great opener. It has a very light-hearted sort of upbeat tone, and it's very much a Paul song, no doubt about that, with him on lead vocals, piano, and yet again playing a guitar solo, which we've seen a few times throughout the Beatles albums. I'm not quite sure why Paul played a few guitar solos throughout the Beatles' career. I don't know, was it because Harrison didn't feel he could play them, or just Paul was just dominating on those songs? I'm honestly not quite sure. And still, Harrison does play some interesting guitar work here. He plays this sort of mimicking bass line stuff, which is quite nice. The song lyrically isn't quite as strong as others on the album in Rubber Soul. This definitely, it feels more like some of the older works, especially with lyrics like, the whole beep beep, yeah, but it's a really fun little tune. The lyrics certainly don't detract from just the brilliance and the simplicity of it. Norwegian, Would the Bird Has Flown. I have a mixed relationship with this song, really. It's not one of my favourites. It's more one of my least favourites. Look, I have to give it credit for the use of a unique, let us say, element, which of course is George Harrison's use of a sitar over this acoustic, folky song, and in my opinion, his use of the sitar isn't wonderful. Well, I think this was the first time a sitar was actually used in rock music on this song. I've never been a big fan of Harrison's sitar work. I think it culminates in one of the worst Beatles songs ever, which we'll see in a couple of albums' time. And even without the sitar, except for the nice lyrics, well, I say nice, but they're not really nice, but they're well crafted by Lennon about one of his affairs while married to Cynthia. And he tries to write it in such an ambiguous way that Cynthia sort of wouldn't gather, and it makes for interesting hearing. Musically, though, nothing that interests me hugely. I mean, it's alright. It's only 2 minutes, luckily, so the sitar doesn't get a chance to bother me too much, but it's definitely not one of the strongest. And You Won't See Me is another interesting song, as it follows a particular trend that really Dylan was one of the forefronts of starting, which is that of writing longer songs. And now, by modern day standards, 3 minutes and 22 seconds does not sound like a long song. And even, then as we get into the 70s, when you have the birth of the prog epic, 3 minutes and 22 is not very long. And in fact, even in 65, I think that was the year that Highway 61 Revisited of Dylan's came out, and that, of course, had Desolation Row, which was like 10 minutes long. But still, for the Beatles, this is pretty long, and I like this song an awful lot. It has this sort of more downbeat tone to it, as McCartney writes about the crisis with his girlfriend at that time, Jane Asher, and it marks a nice change from the usual very sort of positive love songs. Also, I love the effect of the backing harmonies, which really reminds me of sort of the Beach Boys, who I think must have influenced the Beatles around this time period. I don't know the Beach Boys that well, but they were definitely around here. And I know that after Rubber Soul, Pet Sounds came out, almost sort of a response from Brian Wilson. But yeah, and the backing vocals, they use that on a few songs here. It works well. But Nowhere Man, wow. Now, here is a song. This is up there with some of my favourite Beatles songs of all time. I mean, I'm particularly nostalgic about it, as it features on the version of the Yellow Submarine sort of soundtrack I have. I don't know much about the Yellow Submarine now, but I have like a version without the orchestration parts. And it was on that, and I always loved it. And it's interesting considering how apparently it was actually the last song written for the album, as Lennon was sitting there trying to think of something meaningful, and just after hours of sitting there, this came to him. And I mean, what a song to just suddenly come to you when you need something to finish an album. And yeah, definitely has strong folk elements, which is a recurring theme throughout this album. You get a lot of folk, even a bit of soul at times. And yeah, it works well. And then again, you get some poppy sort of vocal harmonies, and it's such a cool song, great chorus. But to me, the best song on here is Think For Yourself. I've always loved the poppier Beatles songs, the ones with the big choruses. I know what a lot of people's favourite song on this album is, and we'll come to it soon, but to me, Think For Yourself's the best. This marks a real maturity in George Harrison's songwriting, with a beautifully catchy chorus, great vocal performance. It also, interestingly, it was actually George's first song to not be a love song, which is pretty cool. But what really makes it for me in the use of the instrumentation, again showing a diversity in instrumentation the Beatles use on this album, is the dual bass line from Paul. It's just genius. You have him playing this, standard, normal bass, and then over the top you have him playing this really fuzzy, noisy bass on top. It just drives the song and adds that unique dynamic, just accentuating the catchiness and the just amazingness, honestly. The Word. Another just great song here, honestly. You can definitely hear the influence, quote unquote, that Paul and John were under while writing it. It has that Stones pop vibe to it, especially in the chorus. It's getting closer to the the psychedelia that the Beatles would get into, of course, with Sgt. Pepper to an extent, and especially when that Magical Mystery Tour album came out. That is tripped of all hell. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And one of the things I like most about it is the lyrics, actually. As the Beatles, before this point, when they're writing love songs, it's very much just a sort of the girl boy standard love songs. But here they take a more abstract look at love. Now that could also be due to the fact that they were stoned out of their skulls while actually writing it, which they didn't usually get stoned while writing songs. And again, just something that differentiates this from the album, and differentiates this album from the previous ones even. Again, the expansion of instrumentation, and here the harmonium is at the forefront of the song, played by George Martin. Again, the extra dynamics just help to elevate these songs. Now, Michelle. This is another of the best songs on the album. As you can see, I like this album a bit more than, some of the others, certainly more than Help that we covered on the last one. And this actually won a Grammy in 1967 for Song of the Year. I believe it was the first time the Beatles won a Grammy. Don't quote me on that, I'm not too sure. And it's definitely one of the best known songs. I personally prefer Think For Yourself and Nowhere Man. That's just me, but this is still one of the crowning achievements of the album. And I really get this, well, I think I should, and I do, get this French bohemian vibe from it. I mean, this song even has some French lyrics, which you don't usually get in Western music, or in English music even. And it fits the musical vibe of the song so well, because it really just conjures sort of imagery of Paris and the left bank, and I can particularly imagine it just as like the soundtrack to sort of Montmartre, and it really is a beautiful song. It's not quite spellbinding as, say, Yesterday on Help, but it's still a lovely McCartney ballad. Now the second side. And to me, the second side is a little weaker in general to the stunning first side. And this song, I'd say this is probably the worst on the album. What Goes On. It's another in a string of disappointing Ringo songs, considering at one point he was my favourite member of the band. I mean, I still love his voice to this day, I really do. I think it's just great. And this is just, I can understand how some people can like this, but to me, it's just way, way too that sort of light, twangy country for me. I don't really like country music. I haven't been able to yet find a band that can either pull off country music or a country music band that I like. I don't particularly like Dylan's country music period, and I certainly don't like it when the Beatles do, or Ringo Starr's later solo albums, which have a bit of a country tinge to them. And interestingly, Ringo actually has a writing credit for this song, his first writing credit on a Beatles song. Now, how much he contributed is debatable. I don't think that much. Yeah, I don't really like this song. It's not for me. Gal. Now, this is a pleasant number. It almost has this sort of European, traditional sort of tinge to it. I can't put my finger on, what country is, but there's something that I sort of recognise as some form of European traditional stuff. I don't know, tell me in the comments if you have a better idea. But on the acoustic guitar, and It's not a song, you know, I particularly go on my way to listen to, think, oh yeah, I'm going to be listening to Gal. No, but it's decent, you know, it's decent. I'm Looking Through You. Now, this is a far better, predominantly acoustic song, mainly Paul, and this just has so much more energy than the previous two, especially in this fantastic little section from George after the chorus, where he just unleashes these crunchier, faster sort of rock and roll sounding little guitar riffs, yeah. And the song's change in pace is definitely to getting my words mixed, okay. That change in pace is definitely to the song's benefit, no doubt. And then we come to what a lot of people consider the best song on this album, which I wouldn't, but it's certainly an awesome song. In My Life. Now, this has received a ridiculous amount of acclaim, honestly. I didn't realise until I was just doing some research on this album that this song is placed at number 23 on Rolling Stones magazine's top 500 songs ever. It topped Mojo's list of all-time songs in the 2000s. And it's like, I wouldn't really even put this in my top 15 Beatles songs, honestly, let alone the greatest song of all time. I mean, look, it's a strong song, and it's probably my favourite song. Well, yeah, maybe my favourite song on side 2. But it's not that great. I mean, you know, you have the nice touches like George Martin's piano, and the bridge is nice, and the reflective lyrics from John are really strong lyrically. It's a very strong song, but I don't know. It's, as I said, the best on side 2, one of the best songs on the album, no doubt about that, but really, one of the best songs ever? No. Now, Wait. I don't actually have that much to say on this track, quite honestly. It doesn't have anything that particularly distinct. It's a strong folk rock song. Nice hook, nice vocal melodies, and I like the use of maracas from Ringo. It's always a bit of fun. And yeah, I get this sort of rough, sort of jam sound to it. Like it has a rough edge to it, which, yeah, not bad. If I Needed Someone, this is yet another great Harrison song. Really memorable guitar riff on his 12-string lead, even if the riff was apparently, I don't actually know the song, but apparently I've heard it was heavily based on the lick from Roger McGuinn's, I think, The Bells of Rimney. I don't personally know the song, but apparently he basically, well, not almost copied it, but he took a lot of inspiration from it. And again, the harmonium comes back and used a very good effect. I'm liking this harmonium an awful lot. I don't know much about the instrument, but it sounds really cool on these songs. Lastly is Run For Your Life, and this has the proud title of being Lennon's least favourite Beatles song, and the one he regretted recording the most. Yeah, I can sort of understand why. I personally prefer it to What Goes On. What was it? What Goes On? Let me just check. Yeah, What Goes On. But it's probably the second worst on the album, honestly. It starts in the weirdest way, this really threatening tone, where it just comes out of the line, "I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man." It's like, okay, bit darker than you usually expect from the Beatles, especially in this era. It's like, yeah, I didn't quite expect something that violent, but I still say Lennon wrote worse. Like, well, What Goes On, that was really a Lennon-written song. It's okay, this song. It's not that great. Still, overall, in terms of songwriting, this to me is a big step up for the band and marks a turning point in their career. Here, they seem to have matured as artists and developed their skills, not only as musicians, but as songwriters. It's still not my favourite Beatles album. I'd say it's maybe 5th. My top 4 still to go, but you know, that's just how, you know, my opinions on the Beatles. Of course, I can definitely understand why this is many people's favourite. I believe it's Noel Gallagher's favourite Beatles album, and again, the fact that this is 5th is just, in my opinion, it's just a testament to why the Beatles are one of the greatest bands ever. Is to many bands, this would be their career high. I'm going to be giving this album an 8.25 out of 10 for exact, I know, but it's what I feel is fair for the album in perspective with the rest of the Beatles catalogue. It definitely does have its weaknesses, particularly on side 2. I find it goes off a little bit, but still, it's so strong, and everyone should own this album. This has been The Album Man. Thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.